Welcome to The Spotlight, the podcast where veterans and military spouses connect and share how their military experience has transformed their lives and their businesses. Here's your host, Bob Louthen.
Hey, this is your host, Bob Louthen, founder of the VeteranCrowd Network, the network that brings veterans and veteran-led businesses together with each other and the resources they need to prosper. And you are tuning into The Spotlight. Hey, welcome everyone. This is Bob Louthen, host of The Spotlight on the VeteranCrowd Network. We're going to be talking about a very interesting topic today and a new book called On Killing Remotely, The Psychology of Killing with Drones. I have in my hands my copy of it. The author, Wayne Phelps, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Marine Corps, retired, is with us today. Wayne, thank you for stepping into the spotlight. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Bob. I'm happy to be here.
I have been reading your book feverishly over the last couple of days. There is a lot to unpack here, and it just really want to drill down on this topic. Let's start out, though, by saying, how did you decide you needed to write this book?
Sure. Well, I was influenced probably like most young officers when I read Dave Grossman's On Killing as a second lieutenant, I believe. And that really stuck with me throughout my entire career. When I came to the end of my career and I was commanding a UAS squadron, I started thinking about how people responded to the work that they were doing, from a distance, and that Grossman's work on killing didn't really explain how people would respond to that because it was written before the time of armed drones came into existence. So what I wanted to do was update On Killing, looking through the lens of drone warfare.
You break the book into 4 segments. I'm going to kind of walk through each one of them. The first is understanding RPAs. You use the term remotely piloted aircraft as the convention, but walk us through sort of the first part of the book and the high levels of understanding these relatively new technologies.
Yeah, so in the first part, I talk about what remotely piloted aircraft are. The 5 groups that they're divided into, the people that actually operate them, both the pilots, the sensor operators, and then the network of intelligence analysts. And then I go into the missions that we have been using RPAs for, over the last 20 years.
Each of the services has a different approach and deploys these things differently. And I guess some don't even weaponize. I think the Navy, you said, doesn't arm RPAs. But can we talk a little bit about the evolution of these pieces of equipment, particularly in the time of the war on terror? Because at the very beginning, I don't think these things were more for ISR type platforms, if you will, for surveillance and reconnaissance in the beginning. How did that evolution take place?
Well, it really took place as a result of the hunt for bin Laden. So in 2000, there was a couple of predators that were deployed over Afghanistan looking for bin Laden. They found him at a location called Tarnak Farms. I think it was on their 7th or 8th mission. And once they located bin Laden, they expected that there would be cruise missiles kind of raining down on the terrorist training facility there, and nothing happened. They passed the information up the chain of command. No action was taken. So the Air Force and the CIA that collaborated on this mission were really frustrated. They went back and decided that they were just going to arm the platform themselves, so the next time they had an opportunity like that they would be able to finish the kill chain themselves. So by February of 2001, they were already testing the Hellfire missile on the Predator. And then,
Was this a rules of engagement shortfall? I mean, we had the opportunity to get bin Laden that early. Was it rules of engagement that got in the way?
I think it was rules of engagement, but also it was, Afghanistan's a landlocked country, and if you're going to fire cruise missiles from the Gulf region, it's got to fly over another country to get there. So I'm not sure all of the political dealings that they would have to go through in order to do that, or if they were going to take the chance of just firing cruise missiles through another country's airspace without their permission. So it just didn't happen at the time.
So what was who were the people that were at the forefront and maybe leading this evolution, this recommendation at that point in
Sure, it
time?
was. There was a team from the Air Force called Big Safari that does a lot of almost like skunk works, rapid capability development, technology development, and they were partnered with the CIA to work on this platform. And then, of
It
course,
seemed,
General Atomics, the manufacturer of the Predator.
it seems to make perfect sense to do this, but then we start to get into this element of, we're in new ground. It's very interesting in your book. You talk about just and you lay a great foundation. Over history, you talk about the evolution and the increasing distance. The ability to wage war and combat from further and further distances. Literally starting out with somebody throwing a rock, right?
Right.
But then you advance through different archers versus swords, artillery, all of these types of things. And now we've just really reached into a new capability where literally from 7,000 miles away, you have people in combat with little to no personal risk, right? In the armed conflict. Can you talk a little bit about that evolution, and then we're going to get into the psychology of all this because I just find it all fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's human nature to evolve weapons that allow us to kill the enemy from a greater distance while keeping ourselves safe. I think that provides a tactical advantage, and what we've seen throughout the evolution of weapons in history is that development of those weapons. And some of them are met with resistance by the society and the culture, and they're viewed as unchivalrous peasant weapons and things like that, and then eventually they're adopted into the mainstream because they're so dominant. And we've seen that with submarines and snipers and longbows and then really the Predator and the Reaper as well.
So now let me take this one step further. I personally, want to have an AR-15 because I want to be able to reach out and touch someone from a distance as opposed to a pistol. There's the same kind of psychology going on here, but there's been some pushback, and I don't think that people fully understand the implementation of these remotely piloted vehicles. There's a lot of talk about, and I think wrongfully, a wrong analogy that this is like a video game, right? And you address that kind of issue because it's kind of insulting, isn't it, to these pilots? These are highly trained individuals and actually executing, real life missions. Can we talk a little bit about that element of it?
Yeah, absolutely, Bob. In fact, I wrote an entire chapter about the video game comparison. I think, first off, it's very insulting, as you mentioned, and I think it marginalizes the entire community and the work that these professional warriors are doing. To compare killing somebody in a tactical situation by a professional warrior to playing a video game is absolutely insulting. These folks are highly trained. They're professional. They adhere to the law of armed conflict and the rules of engagement. They're very discriminating in their targets and the time that they choose to strike these targets. And there's a human connection to it. So to compare that, taking a life to playing a video game is, just reeks of a lack of understanding of what we're doing.
You alluded to just a minute. This is actually very intimate combat. In spite of the fact that the pilot might be thousands of miles away, these high definition cameras. I mean, you're seeing these individuals as human beings. Can you share a couple of those stories? You interviewed hundreds of folks and have their quotes about this kind of comment. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I think the distance, the physical distance to the fight is almost irrelevant in this situation. What I think is most important is your cognitive distance, or your empathetic distance to the fight, right? A lot of RPA aircrew like to say that they're 18 inches away from the fight because it's unfolding in front of the screen, in front of them in high definition. It's the technology that allows for this, right? The persistence of the aircraft, the fact that it can fly for hours at a time and you can swap crews out in the middle of a flight, coupled with the high definition cameras. So you're seeing really humanizing things about a target, and you're watching him for days, weeks, months, sometimes even years before you have the right opportunity to strike that target. So this technology gives us the ability to exercise tactical patience. I know that there's a lot of things in the media that talk about civilian casualties with drone strikes, but through my interviews and my research and experience, what we found is that this weapon system gives us the ability to be very discriminating, to target the enemy at the right place at the time of our choosing. And a lot of that involves building a pattern of life, what we call a POL of the target. And what that means is you're just watching their daily routine. You're watching them, take their kids to school. You're watching them go to lunch, go to the market, kick the soccer ball around in the backyard, hanging out with their family. So you're seeing a lot of these things that really put the humanity of the target on display. So I like to call it a one-sided intimacy that forms with the target. It's like if you watch a TV show and you start to develop this rapport with characters on a TV show. So you have this this long history of observing and watching this target, and then eventually the time is going to come where you're going to strike that target, and you know almost everything about them. I've talked to some sensor operators that said that they knew their target better than their roommate. They could pick the target out in a crowd based off their hand gestures or their the gait of their walk, or just how they behave. So it's very intimate.
We're going to come back to that.
And now a word about a VeteranCrowd Spotlight sponsor. The Severn River Leadership Group is a veteran-owned small business committed to the development and success of military veterans, first responders, elite athletes, and our community. We invest in each with our time, talent, and treasure through small business investing, coaching, and consulting. Leadership can be a very lonely place because of all of the responsibility and accountability involved and the decisions that need to be made. In today's world, small business owners and entrepreneurs need a trusted advisor in their corner to have real conversations about real life and business stuff. That's what the Severn River Leadership Group provides: personal leadership and team coaching for small business owners and entrepreneurs focused on emotional intelligence, personal and team resilience, decision-making, and team effectiveness. If you are a veteran, first responder, or elite athlete small business owner looking for a trusted advisor to help you get to the next level, Connect with us online at www.severnriverleadershipgroup.com.
Hey, we're talking with Wayne Phelps, Lieutenant Colonel, retired United States Marine Corps. Wayne, tell us a little bit about your career. How did you become a United States Marine? How did that happen?
Yeah, I was going to college at St. Louis University, and I ran into a Marine officer recruiter at a job fair, and started discussing possibilities of going to officer candidate school with him. And initially he said you can go to 2 sessions of OCS during the summer. There's no commitment afterwards if you don't like it, and you don't have to commission. And I said, well, that sounds interesting. I've always been interested in the military, and kind of a family tradition throughout the Phelps family. So I signed up for officer candidate school, went 2 sessions in the summer in 1995, 96, and then I graduated from college, and then I commissioned. And I said, well, I'm gonna stay 4 years, and I'm gonna stay as long as I continue to have fun. And then 20 years later, I was still having fun, and I gave my family at the 20-year mark kind of the 51% vote whether we stay or leave. So they were tired of moving around, and my son was getting ready to go into high school, so we called it quits at that moment. But
it's amazing how many people go into the service and think they're going to make a career of it and don't, and how many go into the service and don't think they're going to make a career of it and do. So I just, you found your home in the Marine Corps. It's fascinating. Hey, I want to read one quote out of the book, if I may, and I'm going to do my best to do this. And this is in the context of another section of your book called "All Topics Considered: Are We at War?" And I pulled this out, and it's a section called "War as Defined by a Dead Prussian." And of course, we're talking about Karl von Clausewitz. So Karl von Clausewitz's theories on war are widely accepted as dogma among the vast majority of military scholars. According to Clausewitz, on war, war is the continuation of politics by other means. He describes war as a duel between two sides and goes on to define war as an act of force to compel our enemy to do our will. Clausewitz recognized that it is the nature of humans and civilization to make advancements in technologies and improvements in weapons used in war, but ultimately the duel between two sides and the constant struggle to bend the enemy to our will does not change. So the means may change, but the objective remains firm. It is the nature of war. I think this is an important part. And then you go on to say, or ask this question: do you think RPAs have changed the nature of war or simply improved the tools by which war is fought? How do you answer that question?
I absolutely think that it's just changed the means, right? It's just another tool. I don't think it's changed the nature of war. I think that is, as Clausewitz said, that's constant, right? That's not changing. We're always trying to bend the enemy to our will. But I think that the means and the tools that we use to do that are constantly evolving through technology. So what I thought was interesting was the people that I surveyed, about 50% of them thought that it had actually changed the nature of war. And the other 50% said, no, it's just another tool. It's no different than any other technology that's evolved through time. So
let me ask a question in that regard. Do you think that, one, we need to understand this tool better, right? Which we don't. And that's why your book is so important. But do you think that politicians seem to think that maybe this solution is easier to use, in resolving these political questions because of the distance and the nature and the perception that there's less risk involved with this? I mean, don't we need to educate our leaders, our politicians about this better?
yeah, I actually talk about that as well in the book, and whether this technology makes it easier for politicians to decide to go to war. I don't think it does, because there's no examples where they specifically say, yes, we're going to go to war with this country or this violent extremist organization, and we're only going to use drones, right? Because you have to have the probability of success, and fighting an air war alone, despite the many scholars in the past that have said that we can achieve success through just air power solely, that really doesn't come into play. Most of the times you have to have boots on the ground, and a lot of the conflicts we're involved these days involve us influencing through other means the situation and the environment, and you're not going to do that through drone strikes. So I don't think just having drones employed over a country gives us the greatest probability of success to influence and change that situation.
Let's shift gears and talk a little bit about the psychology. You go into great lengths to talk about, the intimate nature of this combat and the impact that it has on the flight crews that are manning these aircraft. We've talked about the intimacy side. We haven't talked about some of the atrocities that, literally you're seeing in high definition take place, that some of these bad actors are committing. Can you share a little bit about that side of it? There's a intimacy and a connection with these people. You talked about playing soccer with their kids, but what about the other side, the ugly side of these individuals that we're observing?
Yeah, the high definition camera allows the crews to conduct, post-strike analysis in intimate detail, in very graphic detail of the strikes they just conducted, and that does impact a lot of folks, whether it's temporary or kind of a long, if they have some sort of like post-traumatic stress disorder. There's several studies that have been conducted by an Air Force psychologist looking at RPA crews and intelligence analysts, and that initially put the PTSD percentage at about 4.3% of crews. They introduced a human performance team into a lot of squadrons, which consisted of psychologists, chaplains, and medical professionals that were there in order to help these folks deal with some of these experiences. And then he conducted another survey a couple years later, and the percentage of PTSD folks actually went up to 6.1%. Yeah. In the survey that I conducted, I asked air crew intelligence analysts, if they felt like they had suffered from PTSD from the work that they had done, and it was either a yes, maybe, or no, kind of answer. Almost 13% of them said yes, that they felt like they had suffered from PTSD. Another 24% said maybe, that they weren't quite sure. Now that shouldn't be confused with a diagnosis from a mental health professional, but what I think it is indicative of is how these people feel about the work that they have done, and they feel about their own mental health as a result of it. So there are three main things that happen during a mission that have the possibility of causing some sort of negative response, whether it's temporary or long lasting. And the first one is that pattern of life that we were talking about, where you develop this one-sided intimacy with the target, and eventually you strike that target. The second one is observing friendlies or friendly casualties or friendly killed in action, and you're unable to actually prevent that from happening, which I think really ties to how connected these crews are to the fight.
Sort of a survivor guilt issue.
Yeah, exactly, like a survivor guilt, that they're providing overwatch and they weren't able to prevent it from happening. So there's this survivor guilt. And then the third thing, which really goes into how ethical our warriors are, is any sort of civilian casualties that occur during the mission has a significant impact on them.
Your book, you have some harrowing details about that kind of thing in the book. It's some of it's hard to read. I got to tell you, it's a story that needs to be shared. Let me ask a different question. How does this warrior turn on and turn off? He's literally commuting home in the evening and spending time with his family. How does that on and off switch work? And what are the special problems that creates?
So the technology has allowed for us to put people in a position where they are commuting to combat on a daily basis.
Called a deployed in garrison. I mean,
Yeah,
the
deployed in garrison.
oxymoron, right?
Right. So your traditional warrior will deploy into the theater of operations, fight for a period of time, and then they will transition home. So for any deployment, there's two transitions, right? You mentally prepare yourself to go into harm's way. You fight for a little while, and then you transition back to home life. For people that are flying remotely piloted aircraft from the United States, that transition occurs every time they go to work. Right? So they wake up in the morning at their house, they mentally prepare themselves to transition into a combat environment. They go to work, they fly a combat mission where they might kill somebody on the other side of the planet, and then they have to transition to come back home and have
Go to the kids' soccer game.
Yeah, go to the kids' soccer game, have dinner with the family. That ability to switch back and forth and compartmentalize on a daily basis, I think, takes a significant toll on them over a long period of time. And then you couple that with the fact that there's a lot of shift work that occurs. So you might spend 6 weeks on day shift and 6 weeks on mid shift, and your circadian rhythm gets disrupted. So you're tired, you're constantly switching between home life and combat, and then you're experiencing these kinds of things during your mission. So it's unprecedented technology that has led to unprecedented problems with these warriors, and I don't think people fully understand that.
We're winding down, at least we would hope, winding down in the war on terror here, but not RPAs. What is the future? What do you think the next 5 years holds for the United States with the use of remotely piloted aircraft? And all these people have been saying for a long time the last fighter pilot's been born. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think what we'll see is either continued use or increased use of RPAs to keep an eye on some of the areas where we're pulling people out. Right, we don't want some of these areas that we've invested decades of our blood and treasure in. We don't want those areas to turn back into safe havens for people that mean to do harm to the United States. So I think we will continue to have overwatch there that is conducted by RPAs. And I think what we've seen, the trend is that we will continue to increase the areas where we employ these things, whether it's in the Pacific theater of operations or Africa, or the trend has been to increase the amount of combat air patrols that RPAs fly.
Yeah, let's talk on one more little touchy topic, and that you do allude to in the book, and that's robots and autonomous aircraft. What's your theme on that?
Well, I think that's another trend that we're seeing. The convergence of artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, and armed platforms all coming together to a point where in the future we might see lethal autonomous weapons that are sensing the environment, sensing the target, determining intent, and then autonomously making the decision to strike without human input during that kill chain.
We're going to need international rules for this.
They've been discussing it for years about regulations on this, and there's been no consensus on whether the international community wants to ban this or whether they want to continue to allow it. In the news here recently, there was an article of a Turkish drone called a Kargu 2 that was employed in Libya in 2020 that potentially autonomously struck some people. We don't know all the details on that or what level it actually occurred, but it's definitely alarming that we're almost here. We're almost to the point where we think that machines might be making the decision to kill. One of the potential unintended consequences of me bringing to light in the book that there are problems with RPA crews suffering from traumatic experiences through this is that someone might say, well, if they're having a hard time with it, let's just remove the human from the loop and that'll solve the problem. My intent through this entire endeavor has not been to say that the human needs to be removed from the loop. In fact, I think it should always be difficult to kill another human being. And I think that we need to have humans in the loop. I don't think that we'll ever get to the point where a machine will fully understand the context of the environment to the point that a human can, or even have that empathy in situations where you might be able to strike the target according to the rules of engagement, but it might not be the right time or place to do that.
This is a fascinating book. We've been talking with Lieutenant Colonel Wayne Phelps on killing remotely, the psychology of killing with drones. As we wrap up here, what's the plan? How can people find the book? You doing and are you going on a book tour? This is fascinating. So people need to hear you talk about this book.
Yeah, so you can find it anywhere that you typically find books: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kindle, Audible. I mean, it's out there in all forms. Whether you want to listen to it or read it, it's out there. And as far as a book tour, no, not right now, just because of current restrictions in different areas. But I did my first book signing on Tuesday, and I've got another one scheduled in Dallas in mid-July. So
congratulations and good luck on that. We will put links to all of those outlets on the show notes for our listeners. Are you on social media as well?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn. Okay. With your permission, we'll put your LinkedIn profile up there as well so that people can get in touch with you. Hey, we've been talking with Wayne Phelps, a retired Lieutenant Colonel, United States Marine Corps, the author of a really interesting book on killing remotely, the psychology of killing with drones. I have found it very fascinating. Wayne, thank you for being our guest today. Thanks for stepping into the spotlight.
Thank you, Bob. It was my pleasure.
Hey, you've been listening to the Spotlight on the VeteranCrowd Network. We're bringing veterans and military spouses on our program who are making a difference in our community. Certainly, Wayne Phelps is one of those folks. I want to throw out an Army Bravo Zulu to you, Wayne. Thanks so much for your service, and thanks for writing this book. And folks, that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to Spotlight by VeteranCrowd. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and uploads, please visit our website at VeteranCrowdNetwork.com. We'll see you next time.